You know, with 1 year that we have lived through with this very important mechanic that I have been trying to make it up to be, I have to be honest, I do like divine skill. Like once per game skill that can make a change or break the match does makes a lot of difference. Though I do feel they could have gone a little bit more creative with the way they design those divine skill. And I'm fully aware that I am making this video a little bit late compared to the rest, but I don't really want to take the thunder of Godmans, who did a tier list on what are the strongest divine skill. Obviously is Dusted.
Shut up, simp.
So I thought what would be interesting is to rank both Fated One and Destined One in a two separate lists in the same video. But I also want to include what I would like to call a reward tokens, you know, like things that let me give with like the golden chainsaw and stuff, where I'm giving my favorite Fated Ones and the runner-up, and the same goes for Destined One and the unit that I personally like that lot. So there are a total of 6 tokens to keep it out, and of course this will be ranked based on the legibility of this card in meta. And just one more rule here is that if any of them had an alternate form, unless it is in complete different nation, I will consider it as one entry. So things like Rezaio and Rezaio Vita will be considered one entry. Number 7 pains me because among the Fated One, this is the only deck that I ranked it C tier at its lowest. Lyle Amorta. This unit, I will say this first, has my golden seal of honor for my favorite law unit among the divine skill unit, purely because of how there are, I think it kind of a little bit cheating, because you know we have seen what happened if the law of Amorta did not exist. So it is a little bit of cheating, but I think I really like the way Amorta really cares for Rezaio, if only she cares more about the way she plays.
Emotional damage!
I'm not saying her playstyle is bad, especially considering DCVTO5 support with Gaveliers. It allowed Lyle to be able to OTK on turn 3, but the problem with her, I think, is just boiled down to a simple fact of how much she does rely on some of the generic support like Zerudan, and at the same time how much key piece you really need on the field to fully and consistently realize your combo, because binding the Vanguard is not exactly a good thing to do when you want to call out another unit, purely because of the fact that it makes it a lot harder to recycle it back to deck, even if she has a way to. But yeah, overall I would say she is a strong deck, but she definitely took a bit longer than the rest to be good. Moving from the bottom of Fated One, we move into the bottom of the Destined One. And I'm not gonna lie, 5 first review Destined One were kind of mid in almost every aspect. But if you ask me who has the most painful start, it's definitely Alden. I mean, the guy got shafted back in DBT 13 before he became a Destined One, get some good card in DBT 01, get a very awkward protection skill despite him being called the Destined One of protection in DCBT 04, and then got shafted again in DCBT 05. I just feels really bad for Alden. Like, yes, I did rate him a bit higher than one particular deck I'll be talking about later, but he definitely has more problem than any other Destined One right now. His playstyle is there, it's just that I feel Bushiroad just didn't have enough slot to work a good support to put into his deck. I just hope they give more for him and not some half lukewarm support we have been receiving so far. Number 6 for Fated One. I'm not gonna lie, if you consider the power level of this deck right now, it is hard. But if you consider the whole history of each of the Fated One, it is safe to say Chris Rain definitely had it hardest, because it took her 4 main booster before she get what I would consider to be her base support, Tormana. Like, that Tormana makes so much difference for her, and I would say the only reason why I put her at number 6 here is because she was in the B tier in my tier list before, and I feel that is the only reason I have to go for to put her at number 6. But in all fairness, from Chris Rain onward, all the decks are really strong and has to an extent managed to top at least top 8 in some form. But yeah, overall I think Chris Rain, as much as I put her at 6th place, she is definitely getting my Silver Fated One reward as my second favorite Fated One deck as of the time I recorded this video. Moving on to numbers 5 for the Destined One, and this entry was my silver Destined One reward. But unfortunately, I have quite a bad relationship with this deck since then. Yes, I still have the deck, but I feel, you know, like when you go into the later dates, you start to see more of the person. This is the same case with me. Number 5, Lycia File. This deck does have its own plus with its consistent crit after the device skill, triple drive more or less every turn, and generally quite a really high number. But the problem with Lycia is that as much as you get some power boost from the rear guards, it's the Vanguard drive check that is the most dependent. I mean, there are many D1 skill units that does heavily dependent on the drive, but I feel Lycia definitely had it worse if you do not check drive. And that is mainly because of the fact that it kind of boils down to either you're playing order and getting better filter, or you're playing these quite powerful units but there are all bricks in your deck. That is, I feel, the biggest sin of Lycia File, the over-reliance on many of the cards that doesn't have shield value. So that's why the deck can more or less draw more than 3 cards per turn. It feels like the defense is weak, and that's why she's at number 5, and that was also the reason why I lost very badly in my recent Relical Cups. Okay, I'll say this now. 5th place and 4th place for the Fated One, I would call it in the similar position, because at the end of DCBT04, which is where they last get the support, they are literally just beside each other. So the number 4 should be obvious to you by now, Zoga. Zoga definitely has a very interesting record because he is one of the very few boss units that not only came from the past, but also the one that did have multiple forms in the past as well. Each of them does have more or less the same goal, and all I can say is this lah. In a meta where a lot more decks are slower, Zoga will shine, because as long as you can get all the setup you needed, Zoga just goes off. But the problem comes when you are not able to go off, or your opponent are able to actually clap you back really hard, which is something that I feel more decks are able to do now with things like Stride decks and other Fated One. His glass cannon nature come into play a little bit too much. Moving into number 4 of
Destined One,
we have another interchangeable entry, in the sense that each of this deck has its own advantage and disadvantage that I feel is more or less equivalent. But with the recent performance of this particular deck, and this is quite some time after I already made the DCBT05 tier list, I do have to say Emporio has been losing some momentum. The deck is still as strong as the 3rd entry, but I do have to admit that in the recent time, it does lose a lot of momentum because the support was a little bit awkward. But as a base, I do prefer Emporio over the number 3 because of the fact that the deck plays very well with aggro decks, as it has ability to gain more power when you take damage, and the deck itself does juice up your units very well, on top of consistent filter as well. Unfortunately for Emporio, the meta has shifted away from low attack but multiple attack to big number but just have enough multi-attack. So because of that, the defensive that Emporio has is no longer enough, and because of that slight shift, it unfortunately loses to the number 3 of the Destined list. Okay, as I mentioned back in the Zoga entry, if you notice where Zoga was in my DCBT04 tier list, you might see my number 4 on the Fated One list as well, Velstra. Velstra does have a very interesting evolution where a lot of his support are actually very good. It improves a deck in some way or another. Even the D1 version of himself, with some of many to set it to be one of the worst D1 skill of all time, I digress on that because the fact that you have ability to set up all of your bricks beforehand just makes so much difference, but that's just my thought. On top of that, Moles has some kind of interaction regardless of what you're trying to do. You're trying to discard card from the cost of Fry Heist or any other card effect in your deck, you technically has Felicta and Esther that does turn those discard into something strong. And don't forget, you can still run the discard cycler if you want to, so that means that the deck essentially have 60 different discard cycler in some way, which is quite insane. Essentially, Velstra has evolved into a deck that more or less do everything that it needed to do very well. The only reason it wasn't able to be in the meta consistently enough is just because the support is kind of like one step away from being broken, so it wasn't able to push Velstra enough to become a consistent meta threat. Especially they literally just make one joke version of Velstra that is just way better than Velstra and the other deck one combined. It's a tragic story of Velstra, but I have to admit he is definitely really strong and at the same time mid as fuck. Okay, time to get into, I would say, a good one here, cause this stupid deck has consistently beat my ass in the tournament as long as I can go first. Number 3 of the Destined One is Equilibra. I know I did mention him to be mid and I still stand by my point on that regard. The deck has a good rush, but at the same time it feels like because the deck has a good rush, they decided to limit the deck capability to pull the full power of Equilibra out. But fortunately for Equilibra, I do say he have one of the better support in DCBT05, and I would say he was able to fix some of the issue that he has, and that is the fact that his trigger doesn't trigger consistently enough, so he gets a filter that does help you to fetch some of the more important card of the deck. So the support really helps the deck, but it doesn't really help how restricted the Equilibra as a boss unit currently is, as his reliance on overcharge unit is unfortunately his biggest downfall. Yeah. Number 3. What could it be? Of course it's... Okay, in all fairness, if you talk about DC BT04, he was the strongest fated one. But with BT05, Vanguard and Rosael did get a new toys that shift their position even better and was able to hard counter Blackmire better as well. So unfortunately for Blackmire, he got a short end of the stick, and it is a shame because he received my gold fated one token, fated one medal token, whatever I was calling it.
Sure. Bunghole, continue.
But yeah, he is my favorite fated one, and for many reasons in all fairness, in terms of gameplay, I like that kind of playstyle. High risk, high reward without the heavy reliance on trigger. Like, trigger does make game or break the game, but you can still finish off your opponent without the reliance of that because of how thick Blackmire number is now, especially you considering how insane of a support Velduroc Dragon is for Blackmire. Oh, and one more thing I have to talk about Blackmire is that it is drawn by one of my favorite illustrator of all time, Daisuke Izuka. I just love his style of intricate design of the dragons and even the human design that he did draw for Bushiroad in general as well. And I mean, he does draw some of the most iconic unit for Vanguard as a TCG. So you know how much I simp for this guy.
Shut up, simp.
And the fact that I finally get a really cool ass looking Dusted unit that is drawn by my favorite illustrator of all time, you know I'm gonna give him a gold reward. If only I was able to go to his signing recently. I'm not gonna lie, as we move closer to the top, the entry is getting a little bit more obvious, especially with the Destined One at the second place, as not only it is, in my opinion, the second strongest Destined One as of now, but also this unit received double reward of the gold Destined One reward and the silver law reward. And of course, this unit is the alternate version of Lio Amota, the unit that won the gold award for the law, Destined One Uptime, Lio Odium. This unit is a very interesting case for me because yes, I like my Dark State, but there is one particular group of units I do not like it that much, and that's Gear Chronicle. And I dislike it not for the aesthetic is 10 out of 10, but I don't like it for a personal reason. And I will just leave it at that for now. But regardless, the deck still managed to impress me in the sense that I enjoy playing it as a deck. Meanwhile, it also is a really powerful deck despite being a 3-attack deck. This deck kind of point out a lot of issue that Emporio has, in the sense that yes, both are 3-attack decks, but Emporio use a lot of resources despite actually do more. more, but Lyle proves me that sometimes less is more, and that's exactly is what Lyle doing for you with consistent power buffing throughout the game, ability to get a very easy triple drive, and most importantly, the divine skill. Yes, it is once per game for that restriction of an extra turn, but the fact that I can close game many times with that extra turn just prove that Lyle Odium deserve her second spot in this list. And we have come to the top 2 of Fated One, and I feel number 2 here is a definition of Bushiroad actually decide what deck to meta, as we have Raziel. I have talked about Raziel multiple times on this channel already, and the best way I can put it is that it's a perfectly tuned boss in it, but it does have its own flaw in the sense that if the support doesn't go along with his utility, the deck just doesn't really function, and the utility indeed he get in the form of not just Gabelius but also Nevilius, Nobia, Cardellus. Essentially, he has all the cases covered for all the situation he might need. The only reason I feel why he's in the second place and not first is kind of boiled down to the fact that all of these pieces has to be in the drop first, and currently Keter has zero way of milling their card, and in all fairness, deservedly so, because if they get those, the standard will just simply broke. And let's be real, for the whole device here, I feel some of the developer in Bushiroad team really have a hard on for Dragon Empire. But before we get to talk about Waga, I mean it is obvious who is the number 1, let's talk about the number 1 from the Destined side, and that unit is of course Levidras, the Destined One of Infinity, nay, the Destined King of Infinity. Yes, Imperial was a reason that I'm willing to bring Levidras up from B all the way up to the base of the Destined One. And the fix that they did to Levidras is so simple, but it makes so much difference for the deck, because now the deck no longer reliant on having a counterblast to generate markers and can place marker anywhere now. So if you are in a slightly disadvantageous position, you can just place the marker so that you can play defensively a whole lot better. And this unit also gets my silver Destined One token. Medal. Yeah, I think I should call it medal. The face was so good that it impressed me. That's how much good of a fake it is. And I haven't even talked about the new support that he did receive, which complements extremely well with the previously released support. So because of all these factors put together, that's why I'm putting Levidras as the best Destined One unit of the list. So, why I decided to put Waga as number 1? If you have played to an extent in the meta or in the tournament before, you might understand why. But for those who don't, to put it as simple as possible, he is an Overlord rework done right. Because not only he is able to consistently go into 2 Vanguard restand every single turn, he had additional restand occasionally with the Divine skill that does help him to actually push the opponent to edge. 4 drive is no joke, and his support has always been very helpful to him as well. Shura helps to recycle rear guard while being a self-reviver herself. Quimpersa have to search out for the deck. Storm Slasher is essentially a free self-revive, and many of the draw support that Dragon Empire has, this deck can use all of them. That is how ridiculous it is. And I haven't even talked about the fact that he has Rakshasa that turned his retire front row into retire the entire board. In all fairness, that is all they can do to actually improve Waga, because if they do anything more than that, it would just be broken as fuck. And that is why I say someone in Bushiroad most likely have an extreme hard on for Dragon Empire because of this card, or maybe because of now, who knows. But that's the objectively correct list for my Destined One and Fated One. But if you guys are wondering what is my own personal list of the Destined One and the Fated One, here is the list. A little bit different, I know, and you can kind of see my deck preference here. But yeah, what do you guys think of the list itself? Do leave down the comments below. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to clap that sub and become a member for some cool perks. And this is Mac Megane signing out.
Boom, boom, boom.